Hello and welcome to today's webinar on 5 ways to approach a win strategy. I'm Mallory Price and will monitor today's session. Joining me today are Mark Wigginton, Daryl Jones, and David Bull. All three of our panelists today are excellent practitioners on this subject and we are so happy to have them with us. Thank you to those of you who submitted questions with your registration. You help to drive our webinar and make sure that we get your questions answered during. However, if you do have questions during the webinar, please feel free to type them into your questions tab on your control panel, and we will get to as many as we possibly can. Before we get into the 5 ways to approach a win strategy, I wanted to talk to you about a good, better, and best way to approach these 5 approaches, if you will. So starting with good, you can base your strategy on your features alone, and that's a good way to go, but maybe there's a better way to do it. So better, you can base your win strategy on customer needs and your solutions. Or best, you can base your win strategy on customer needs, competitive position, and your solution, giving your contract, just giving it a little something extra. A win strategy is built around our strengths. We leverage strengths while mitigating weaknesses. A win strategy also helps us fill gaps in our solution or competitive position. A win strategy helps us identify actions we can take to improve our P-win. So Brad, we will turn the time over to you to teach us about those 5 approaches.
Okay. All right, Mallory. I'm not going to do all the teaching here. I'm going to kind of facilitate a discussion. And thanks for your intro and for moderating this. And we'll be watching for any questions you have throughout. But welcome to this, and thanks for spending some time with us today. We know your time's valuable, and we always appreciate that investment in joining us. So Mallory introduced the topic perfectly, and we just want to set the record straight. There is confusion sometimes about what a win strategy is. So let's just for a minute talk about what it is not. A win strategy is not the same thing as a theme statement. And because of the questions many of you submitted in advance, we actually are going to spend some time toward the end of this webinar on how do you develop an effective win theme and a win theme statement. So we will definitely cover that, but a win strategy is not the same as a statement, a theme statement. A win strategy is certainly not just a hunch or bias. We don't build our solution and our message and our proposal around hunches and biases. It's not our best guess on what the customer wants. It's not low price, although maybe it is sometimes. Sometimes it is fair that the win strategy is to be the low price solution. So that's fair. That's why we put sometimes there. A win strategy is not only being compliant in most cases. We have to go, anyone can be compliant. Most competitors, most bidders can be compliant. What can we do to go above and beyond compliant? And a win strategy is certainly not all about us. And we'll talk about that as we go through the good, better, best approaches to win strategy. So what I want to do is I'm going to ask Mark Wigginton to spend some time with us going over this first, the good approach to a win strategy. And then after Mark, and maybe we answer some questions in here, we're going to have Daryl talk about better. So we'll go good, better. And then I've asked David to spend a little bit of time talking about the best approach to developing a win strategy. And that's where we're going to get into the 5 elements, if you will, the 5 key ingredients to a really effective win strategy. So Mark, I'm gonna turn time over to you and talk to us about a good win strategy plan.
Great, thanks, Brad and Mallory. Appreciate it, and I want to add my thanks to everybody that's on the call. We really do appreciate your time and interest. We can't do this without you being involved. I'm really appreciated the fact that I have the opportunity to talk about the kind of the baseline of dealing with the good element and focusing on back to when I really first started as a salesperson, and I really focused a lot on features. I really focused a lot on thinking that the solution that I was offering to my customers was the biggest and the best and the toughest, because we had the coolest whiz-bang elements of this. Really, to define a feature, it's really just those aspects of our solution, the things that are the key pieces that make up what we're bringing to the party. There are some really important things to think about when we look at this, and it's understanding at this level that when we're focused on features, we're really focused more on what we're trying to sell rather than what they are trying to buy. So we're focused less on the customer and more on what we're trying to do. So an example of that would be if you were selling drills, you may be selling a drill, you may be talking about the speed of it, that it's reversible, that it's cordless, and all those things. And what your customer really is after is trying to develop a whole. So when we try to move off of that position of just being focused on us, we have to really find a way to move off of these issues where we get into some of the prejudices that you see on the screen, where we think we're the biggest, we think we're the fastest, we think our solutions are state of the art. Again, this is when we get in a situation where we're really telling the client and we're not selling. We're not kind of co-creating solutions with them. Think back to almost 100 years ago now. It's hard to believe, but Dale Carnegie talked about the fact that a person's name is to him or her the sweetest sound in any language. And that's true because folks buy from folks. So even when we're selling in a corporate environment, we really have to move off of us, find a way to talk about them. And when we do that, we really begin to get a solution that's focused on them. The graphic on the side here is, often, a lot of times when I look at documents for customers, I see them really talking about themselves as a lion. But when we're in the customer side of the table, they may see themselves as just another kitten. Moving on, in a pool of kittens, we've got to find a way to differentiate ourselves from that pool. So again, good may not be good enough to win as you go through here. Again, there's some real key elements here, but what these really boil down to me, are three key statements. And the first is we have to learn how to focus on the customer. We need to learn to earn the right to move through the sale process, whether it's a face-to-face sale or it's a written proposal. And we need to find a way to involve our customer. So again, if you look at these bullets, if you don't know what the customer's needs are, you're guessing. You're not focused on your customer. If you're entering the race late, if you're coming in late, someone else has kind of set those ground rules. So we may not necessarily have the right to move through the sales process as we go through there. And finally, if the whole process is, if you're only talking about yourself, what message are you sending to the customer? And are you giving them the impression that when they buy your solution or when you come on site to work with them, that's how you're going to treat them? Remember that this is the first deliverable. The proposal is the first deliverable for whatever project you're working on. Go forward to the next slide. So some good questions to think about to help you really focus on what's going on. And these are questions to ask yourself. Mallory, can you unfold all the questions? Reveal all the questions? Great. So sorry that they grayed out here as we look through, but these are some things to really think it through. Is this solution real? Does the customer really need this? Is it something that we have the ability to supply? Will they buy it from us? Do we have an existing relationship, and what do we know? What is their budget? How is the money funded already? What's their time frame for the solution? And where will this piece go if we develop an ongoing relationship with the customer? So our goal is not to just have kind of a one-off relationship with the customer. It's to really find a way to develop an ongoing relationship. So again, the slides will be available at the end, but these are, if you're not using these in your sales strategy to begin to develop your solution, these are great questions to really ask yourself. And if you're talking with a sales organization, if you're a proposal person and you're talking with a sales organization, these might be some good questions to ping the salesperson on. And with that, I'm going to hand off back to Brad.
Yeah, Mark, a follow-up question, actually a couple, if you don't mind, and I'll let you take first shot, and David and Daryl, if you want to jump in. But one of the people that registered said, the question was exactly this. How how do you do a win strategy when the opportunity is unqualified? And we work with a lot of clients, and I know we see this. I mean, do you have any thoughts on, so what do you do when, you know, something fell in your lap and you're bidding it and you don't think it's qualified?
Well, Brad, I mean, it's a really good question. I think the starting point are some of the questions that are on the screen right now, like really understanding what it is. Is it real? As you've uncovered the solution, you know, whether it's government or whether it's commercial, uncovering if there's really a need and if we can really provide it. And then it's looking at determining, you know, what the relationship is that you have with the customer and whether you still have a chance to approach them. In a commercial world, you always have a chance to have a conversation with the customer, but for those of you on the call that are in the government world, you know that there becomes a point where you can't really talk to them anymore. So, you know, it's a matter of doing a gut check and really just kind of being honest with yourself about what the probability of win is. And I know you guys are going to talk about P-win later in the presentation, but understanding is it really worth the time, the money, and the human resources to go after this?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that gets to certainly to qualifications. So again, just to kind of recap what Mark said, you know, sometimes the best we can do, because we either lack intelligence on the customer or competitor or whatever, sometimes the best we can do is to really sell our key solutions and try our very best to validate, to provide proof points. So if I were to give one bit of advice on this, the good approach to win strategy, it was, if we're going to make claims, if we're going to try to present our features, our solution, we take it the next step and provide some kind of proof, some kind of validation. So thank you, Mark. So let's go from good to better before we get to best. And Daryl, if you would spend some time talking about what it means to go maybe to the next level in developing the win strategy beyond just focusing on us and our solutions and capabilities. Daryl?
Sure. Thanks, Brad. Happy to do it. So moving up from good to better combines our solution with customer needs, and we'll talk a little bit about defining customer needs and how you go through that process in a minute. I think kind of bridging the two topics, the way I think about this, suggest to clients that they think about this is your solutions in and of themselves really have no inherent value to your customer or your client. They are features that may or may not be important to them. Even though they may be the best in the industry, that doesn't mean that they are inherently valuable to that particular buyer. So it takes bridging the solution to the customer needs to be able to make that connection and then align the needs of the client to the benefits that your solution will provide. So that's really the difference. The solution is based on needs, which then can be represented in your proposal as explicit benefits to the client. So how do we get there? So how do we define customer needs? Really, there are two main buckets that put together constitute hot buttons. One of them is identifying issues. Issues are concerns. And these are the things that worry the customer or keep them up at night. For example, part of the reason for their buy may be that they are concerned about increasing competition or shifts in their market that could be related to technology or government policy, for example. Could be that they are concerned that the stock price, the company's stock price could fall in the coming quarters if they don't make some changes. And sometimes it's as simple as personal risk, right? They may be professionally on the hook to make improvements, but if they don't get them done, it could cost them or people in their department their job. So those are the things that really worry buyers at times. The other part of this is motivators. As compared with concerns, these are objectives. What is the customer trying to accomplish or achieve? And there's a list of some examples of what they may be trying to accomplish. So you combine those two things, and that constitutes a set of hot buttons that can be woven into your strategy for winning. Now, if you're doing a good job in the sales process before the release of an RFP, hopefully you'll have an array of hot buttons that can be addressed. But at the end of the day, if you can, through prioritization, if you can focus in on the 2 or 3 things that are most important, whether they be issues or motivators, and have those be the basis of your strategy for winning, you're in much better position than you are by simply representing your solution.
Hey, Daryl?
Yes,
Daryl, I just wanted to jump in here just because this seems maybe super intuitive to some people, especially some who have been on past webinars or through Shipley training. But I want to be the voice here of those that work proposals that might be on the webinar. How valuable it is when a proposal contributor, a proposal manager, proposal writer, whoever it is, has this type of information from the capture or sales lead. If I'm doing a proposal and I'm responsible for writing a section or an executive summary or what have you, if I don't have access to this kind of information, if I don't know what worries the customer or what's motivating them to make this acquisition or this buy, it's hard for me to make my message compelling. And so I just wanted to slip that in there because a lot of our friends on this webinar are in the proposal. So those of you that are on the capture or sales side, please share this information openly and as freely as you can. Sorry to interrupt.
It's no problem, Brad. That's good input. I know that a lot of the questions that came our way sort of touched on what you could sense was the frustration of people in the proposal organization trying to help their companies win, and they were not getting this kind of information. So it is a chronic problem in industry, and certainly you're not alone out there. So next slide, Mallory, please. So really defining a good win strategy or proposal strategy requires an understanding of those motivators and issues. So let's assume we're responding to an RFP. Think about this like an iceberg. The stuff that everybody can see is technical requirements, management requirements, past performance, whatever is stated in the RFP. But really, the danger lies on what is not in the RFP, and understanding that there are those issues and motivators and so on, and left without understanding, it really reduces your probability of winning. I like to think about it this way. If you think about, and I know this happens frequently, particularly in a commercial environment, an RFP will come in, you'll have a salesperson or a capture lead throw down the RFP and say things like, man, I've reviewed this is right in our wheelhouse or right in our sweet spot because we can meet the requirements that are in the RFP. That is not a recipe for success. On the other hand, the stuff below the waterline, if you think about the iceberg example, is based on relationships, it's based on trust, discovery, open communications, things that go on with the client ahead of the release of the RFP. So really, that's where your organization needs to move more toward that sort of thinking if you're going to be consistently successful. So finally, and then I'll finish up here, Brad, and turn it back to you. Think about these three things. Is our solution addressing customer needs? Have we identified the buyers? Are we really writing to the right people or addressing the motivators and issues of the right people in the organization? Number two, are we addressing the customer issues from their perspective, free of bias? Brad talked about bias earlier. In other words, are we sure that we are describing this in such a way that the benefits we're describing are from the customer's perspective and not from ours? And then finally, is our offer customer focused or seller focused? This is trying to put yourself in the shoes of the reader. Are we really focused on what they want and need, or is it still all about us? And that then becomes a writing exercise to make sure that we're communicating value from the customer perspective, not from the seller perspective. So back to you, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. So we're going from good. A good win strategy approach is focus on our strengths, the things we're good at, our features. Better is to focus on that, focus on our strengths, our features, our past performance, but make sure they're aligned with customer needs. We get, like Daryl said, under the surface. We do a better job than the competitors. And we want to talk about best next. Before we go there, Daryl, we had a question that came in when someone registered, and I'd be interested in your input on this because I think it's a good one. When you're the incumbent, do we have to be as focused on customer needs as other competitors? Does that make sense? So that, I thought that was an interesting question. If we are the incumbent, do we still have to get beneath the surface, so to speak? Daryl, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. If your organization works in the government contracting world, you will have seen the trend that incumbency, success and recompetes, it has been declining more and more each year. So without being customer focused, understanding the needs of the evolving program and so on, you're in great jeopardy of that. So yes, I believe the answer in almost all cases would be yes. You need to be just as focused as if you were competing for the work for the first time.
Okay, David, Mark, do you guys have thoughts on that, incumbent versus new bidder?
Brad, there are no shortcuts. I think even as an incumbent, you have to, I agree with Daryl, you have to absolutely pay attention to the customer's needs and compete it as though you were not. And you need to earn the business every opportunity, regardless of whether you're the incumbent or a new bidder.
And it comes back to customer intimacy, because they know your warts. If you're the incumbent, whether it's in the commercial world or in the government world, they know the strengths and they know your warts. And so when somebody new comes along that's bright and shiny, they may be able to displace you based on the fact that they aren't known to the customer. They're bringing a new solution or a new option. Great
comments. I have kind of a related but not totally related question that I think is worth us addressing here before we go to the best approach. And maybe David, I'll give you the first shot at this. Someone asked, what makes a good win strategy? Okay, we're going to talk about that, or we are talking about that. Focus on customer needs, focus on our strengths, the best thing we do. But then the second part of this question is, should we have more than one win strategy? And I think this is a very interesting question, given the complexity of the proposals we're putting together. We've got the management section, the technical volume, cost, past performance. Should there be more than one win strategy on a pursuit? David, your thoughts?
Absolutely, Brad. And just because of what you said, I mean, there should be your overarching, here is our top level strategy. Here's what it's going to take to win because of, and we'll define those ofs here in a second. But, you know, I mean, there should be a sub strategy that says, here's our technical solution and here's why we're better. Here's how we manage it better than anybody else. Here's our past performance and how we have achieved that success. Here's the strategy with our key people or our partnerships with our teammates. All of those, as long as they are addressing specific needs that the customer has, should all be very viable strategies in your solution.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. I totally agree. You know, each major section and sometimes subsections, you've got to think through, you know, what is our message or what is our overriding win theme that needs to be conveyed. There was another, and I'll go ahead and address this now. One question that came in: do you develop win strategies as a group or individually? And I thought, well, that was an intriguing question, and I think it's both. I think the capture or sales lead, the opportunity lead, certainly needs to have significant input, because likely he or she has been in touch with the customer at some level, so they should have heavy input. But I don't think developing a win strategy is something we ought to be doing in isolation, and I think it ought to be at least a small group that helps shape and develop what is this approach, not just the win theme that's going to go in the document, but the win strategy. So that would be my answer to that. Is it probably ought to be a shared exercise to develop these win strategies. All right, so let's go from good and then better, and let's talk about best. Some of the best practices, if you will, for developing win strategies when we're competing for work. So, David, I'm going to ask you to cover this. I'll interject questions or ask them at the end as we go.
All right, folks, let's talk tactically here. You've heard Mallory, Brad, you've heard Mark, and you've heard Daryl suggest all kinds of ways to improve your strategies or what you need to have, how you know, this information, this intelligence, how do we get it? And it starts with a good capture plan. And a good capture plan has 4 C's. And the goal of a good capture plan is to gather intelligence now from your customer, so that hopefully that relationship that you have out there, now you can call upon it and the ancillary folks that you're dealing with to gather this information. And so a good capture plan has 4 C's. The first C is the customer. So how well do you know the customer? Obviously, you know, we just posed the question, if you're the incumbent, that's one level. But if you're not, are you totally new to this person? Is there any way that they've met you or they know you, or do they just know you by name? And all of those answers have different ramifications as to how you develop a strategy. So how well do you know them? Who's on the source selection? Who are the end users that are going to use this? And then how well do they know us? In other words, you know, are they familiar with us? Have we done any kind of business? Do we have any kind of past performance specific to them? Or is this an entirely new relationship? All of those will create different strategies. Competitors, you know, we just can't go into this opportunity thinking that it's going to be sole source to us. That would be so nice, but very rarely do we compete on proposals where there's not competition. So, you know, it's very, very critical. The second C is competitors, and you not only have to know who's competing, but you have to know who is on their team that they're competing with. And the best knowledge of a competitor will also understand and know their solution, so that you can posture your solution against them and begin to discriminate as to why your solution is better. To write an entire proposal without suggesting that there is no competition will not increase your probability of winning. You need to be able to tell your customer that you understand the environment and the competitors that are in that environment. The third C is, Mallory, the next one, the third C is your capabilities. And here's where we have to be really honest, folks. A lot of times, that hope or that wish, I mean, let's be real and let's not fabricate what we can't do. So, I mean, we can mitigate any risk. If we can't do it, can we hire people that can do it? Can we hire companies? Can we merge? Whatever we need to do to bring on that capability is part of defining our capabilities. And, then of course, if we have certain people that are experts, if we have certain capabilities and capacities that are unique, these are discriminators, and these begin to posture us above and beyond our competition and allow us to suggest that we have a better solution. And then finally, the fourth C is cost. And folks, I don't care, it's like Brad, that first slide, he said sometimes, it's always critical. They say it's not maybe this or this in relationship to the importance of how it's going to be evaluated, but it almost always gets down to how competitive are you. If you're 30 or 40%, if you have the best solution, but if your cost is 30 or 40% higher than, you haven't done your homework and you haven't done your price to win. And what is your value proposition? It has to be reasonable and it has to meet the client's expectations of what a fair price is. All of these combined are your probability of win, or they increase your probability of winning. Now, folks, one of the things that we are doing this time, this webinar, is we are giving you a tool that, for me, it's my favorite tool, and that's the bidders comparison matrix. You will have access to that tool. Mallory, the next slide, please. And what that bidders comparison matrix does is you identify who's competing, you identify and rank the needs and the issues of the customers. Mark talked about those, Daryl's talked about those, Brad's talked about. So you put a arbitrary value from the most to the least, and then you rank each one of the competitors and your capability to meet that need. So now we are very, very specifically, we have a tool that gives us quantitative information as to where we stand in relationships. So now we have a concrete document that will give us the 5 ways to develop the best win strategy. And I would argue that there are only 5, and every one of your strategies would come from one of these 5 statements. When you rank all these, you are going to come out on top, hopefully, in a few of these categories. Those become your strengths. You do these better than anybody else. We need to leverage them. That is primarily why we think we can bid and win. Secondly, we know we're going to have some weaknesses. Our competitors know we are going to have some weaknesses, but we need to address these, and these need to be strategies, because if we don't, the discriminatory statements from our competitors will kill us because we haven't addressed it and acknowledged that they're weak. The third one is we have to neutralize our competitor strengths. Obviously, our competitors are thinking the exact same thing we are. They have the capacity and the capability to win, and in some instances, they may have a better solution. So we need to be able to understand and address how we can overcome that. So we have to neutralize our competitor strengths. The fourth one is we have to exploit our competitors' weaknesses. They will have weaknesses. It may be in their past performance. They weren't able to deliver. They're always over budget. They don't have tenured people. They just don't have a mature solution. Whatever it is, we need to know that. That was part of that competitor intelligence gathering. We need to know that so that we can exploit it. And then finally, there are areas like Mark suggested and where Daryl, elevated, where we have discriminators, those things that we do better than anybody else. And most importantly, that the customer needs. These discriminators become incredibly powerful benefits. So at the end of this, take a look at this tool. It's called the Bidders Comparison Matrix. We call it a SMART form because it'll embed formulas and ways to do this that all you have to do is put in numbers, and it's a really, really cool tool. All right, the next slide. Very simply, folks, what strategy is all about, what distinguishes it from all other kinds of plans, is in a couple words, a competitive advantage. We are always looking for, we must establish, we call it a value proposition. What in fact is that competitive advantage that after a client or our customer interacts with us, or after they read our proposal, what is it that they will tell themselves, I must have this solution? That becomes your competitive advantage. It must be clearly written to, and as Mark said at the very beginning, we have to substantiate it and we have to validate it, and it has to become provable so that our customer believes it. Without competitors, there would be no need for a strategy. For the sole purpose of strategic planning is to enable the company to gain as efficiently as possible a sustainable edge over its competitors. You know, folks, it's an interesting time in the sports world. There's like a half a dozen. Golf is winding down, baseball is winding down, basketball is coming up, football is in its prime. I even saw hockey. And every game, every season, teams do what? What's it going to take to win? They create a what? They create a strategy. Why? They want that sustainable edge over their competitors. So at the end of the season, they're doing what? They're playing in the big game. What are we after? We're after a win. That's all we're after. I know of no proposal managers. I have never competed on a proposal where my goal was to lose. Every day your company competes with other companies to succeed and even survive. Your competitors share the same goal as your company. So folks, I mean, it's if you're not doing it, you will get beat because other people are. So, you know, use the tools that we are offering you. Create the strategies that you have to be successful. If you don't have them, figure out a way to get them, because without them, you know, your probability of winning is not nearly as high as it could be. To win and keep winning, strategy is thinking about how you will get ahead in that race. We have to do it consciously every day. That is the only way, because if we're not, our competitors will be thinking of strategies that will beat us. So we need to have a good understanding of how those strategies can be put in place and how they can help us win and increase our probability of winning. Brad?
Good insight, David. Mallory, where can they find the tools David's referring to?
Yeah, so that bidder comparison chart, if you go to the handouts tab in your control panel, you can download it straight from there and have it for your use. Good.
And then I think we added one other simple tool, which I'll cover here in a second as we wind down. It's just a real simple template to kind of force us into thinking about actionable strategies. So, and you can download that and look at it, but we will talk about that as well in a minute. David, one question that came in actually while you were presenting, where does teaming fit within the development of win strategy? You kind of alluded to it when you talked about gaps and weaknesses, but how early or how soon should you consider teaming arrangements when you're thinking through a win strategy?
Real quick, Brad, I would think of it in three ways. One, there's a lot of requirements that have, like, for example, small business requirements. And if you're a large company, which a lot of us are, we have to immediately be thinking of getting people to support our effort that, you know, can meet these 10, 15, 20, 30% numbers that the government office gives us. The second thing is if we are in our strategy development, which this would suggest pretty early on, if we discover a weakness that we have, it might be a good idea to to support that with a teammate that says, okay, if we don't have this capability or this capacity, or if we need this manufacturing or this development or these people, these experts, perhaps the best way is to find and partner with a company that can, in fact, provide that. And then the third thing that I would always consider is if there is a team or if there is a company out there that could enhance somebody else's solution, that if you can team with them to take them off the street and promise you exclusivity, I would strongly consider that as well, because that strengthens your position and weakens your competitor's position, especially if there's only a few people out there that can do this. And the best scenario, of course, would be as if they're a small business that meets more than one goal.
Good, thank you. All right, so good, better, best. There are some good thoughts on how we can get a little smarter, get a little more effective at thinking of win strategy. So let's focus on the best practice. David, Mark, Daryl, they all alluded to the fact that we have to be real, we have to be honest, and one way to do that, and as old-fashioned as this sounds, the old SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat analysis. But in developing a win strategy, at the very heart of this is being honest. What are our strengths? They are going to be positive discriminators for us. We do need to do what Mark said when we're being good and focus on our strengths, focus on our capability, our solutions, our features. But we've got to be honest, there's probably some weaknesses we have. Are we cumbersome in the way we deliver our solutions? Have we, had a false start somewhere? Did we do a budget overrun somewhere? What are those weaknesses? They can become negative discriminators if we're not careful, and our competitors can use those against us. We've got to, as David mentioned, in those 5 bubbles, we've got to address and be willing to address our weaknesses. Opportunities. Some of our greatest opportunities in doing this analysis are to focus in where our competitors are weak, assuming we know who our competitors are. So that becomes opportunities for us, positive discriminators, where we can score higher in the minds of the evaluator. And then potential threats are competitor weaknesses, competitor strengths. Where are our competitors the strongest, and where do we need to at least try to be equal to them? Maybe we can't prove that we're better than them, but could we at least prove that we're equal to them? So there's been a couple of questions come in about some of you that are joining us from smaller companies, that don't have capture managers or a big sales force out there. These very same principles, however, apply whenever we're competing for work. Even if we're a small business competing for a smaller contract, we should at least go through these basic exercises to think about our win strategy. Where are we strong? Where are we weak? Where do we have opportunities to leverage? And where might we be threatened on this pursuit? If it's a 1, 2, 3 person office, so be it. Whoever's bidding, whoever's responsible for this pursuit, for going out and competing, should go through these very basics. Now, we've shown this on other webinars, so I'm going to kind of go fairly quick here. But the idea, one of those 5 bubbles that David showed just a while back was we have to focus on discriminators. This is, again, a best practice. We have to know what we're best at and what matters to the customer. So if you've got these 3 circles here, one represents the competitor capabilities, one is the customer needs, and one, the green one, represents us, our capabilities. The real discriminator is where we can shine and competitors can't. The threat is where competitors can shine and we can't compete. And the neutral positions are right there in the middle, where our competitors can provide the exact same solution as we can. So how do we prove that we're better? How do we really discriminate? These are exercises, regardless of the size of your company, the size of the bid, the pursuit. We need to be thinking this way. We need it's getting, I would bet in all of our industries, it's getting more and more competitive. There's new competitors all the time. We've got aerospace companies that are now entrenched in healthcare. We've got telecom companies that are now embedded in cloud services. I mean, new competitors all the time, and we have to be smart. Now, David alluded to the tool that we're allowing you to go ahead and have and download and play with. And this is kind of what it looks like. All right, what I've done here is just take a screenshot of the tool. It's a bidder comparison chart. Many of you probably who are familiar with Shipley have seen something like this before. It's very simple. It's in Excel, Microsoft Excel tool. And Daryl talked about issues, hidden issues, some of the underlying hot buttons. So very simply in this tool, and we won't go through it all, obviously, but there are some issues that we should know about if we're bidding or pursuing an opportunity. And we list those down the left-hand side here. Issues, hot buttons. We could go as detailed as get into requirements if we want. Then this tool allows us, if we want, to weight them and say, well, the customer thinks that marketing creativity is more important than international experience. Well, then let's weight that a little bit higher because we're doing a scoring exercise here. And then here's us. Our company's name is Vibrant. And we're going to go and honestly, without bias, and be as truthful as we can on a scale of 1 to 10, give ourselves points on each one of these issues or hot buttons. The tool will then tabulate the weighting plus the times the points, and ultimately we're going to end up with each competitor will end up with the score here at the bottom. Granted, this is not scientific. This is completely notional. It's the forced exercise, that doing this exercise that matters. It's going through the process of finding, do we have weaknesses? Do we have gaps? David talked about gaps requiring teaming. This is where you'll find them, by going through an exercise. So I put some red boxes here around areas that are concerning when developing our win strategy. We're only scoring 21 on marketing creativity and sophistication, item number 4 there, where one of our competitors has a 24. We better maybe think about that when we're thinking win strategy. Areas where maybe we have advantages that we ought to leverage. Mark talked about leveraging our advantages. You can see line 6 and 7 then, our features, our low risk. We're scoring higher than competitors. Good. Let's focus on that. Leverage that. We maybe have a problem with our project management approach based on what we know, what we've heard from the customer. They're line 8. We only scored a 12. We have a competitor that scored 16. That's a risk. Price. We might be at risk price against their in-house solution. So you see how it works. Play with it. Make it your own. On your next pursuit, list out some of the hot buttons and key issues and give them a weight and score yourself, your competitors, and see where you stand. This is how you then can shape your win strategy. Where are our strengths? Where are our gaps? Potential weaknesses to help us shape that strategy. So back to what David said, just to reinforce. Leverage our strengths, mitigate our weaknesses and risk, neutralize our competitor strengths, exploit our competitors' weaknesses, some call this ghosting, focus always on discriminators to win. What makes this not just different, but better than the competitors? So that's the bidder comparison chart that we've provided you. So the next tool that you have in your downloadable attachments there, is just a very simple template on forcing us to think through these 5 ways to approach a win strategy. And it's just a template that says, okay, we're going to mitigate our weakness in something by doing what? Remember, I think it was David or someone talked about a strategy is actionable. It is an action plan. So if we're going to mitigate a weakness we have, what are we going to do about it? Leverage our strength in something by doing what? What's the action we're going to take, either in the proposal or in our communication with the customer to solve that? We'll neutralize our competitor's strength. How? Exploit the competitor's weakness. By doing what? We're going to show it in a graph, an image, a chart, an article that was written, a press release. How are we going to exploit that weakness? Always, though, focus on our discriminators. What makes us different and better? So those are really, really the keys. Now, what we wanted to do, we had so many questions come in that talked about how do we embed the win strategy into the win themes and theme statements. So this wasn't the original intent of this webinar, but since there were so many questions about it, we're gonna walk through this. What do we mean by a win theme? And how do we weave our win strategy into a win theme that becomes part of our message? So these are just some standard definitions. We've talked about features. We've talked about benefits. Features are the what we offer. Benefits are answer the so what. The discriminators, then we've talked about win themes. Why us? These themes link discriminating features and benefits to the customer. Daryl talked about that linkage. If we have all these features and they don't benefit the customer, it just doesn't matter. So then a theme statement. This is what we define, how we define a theme statement. It highlights our benefits by emphasizing our discriminators or features. It links benefits of our solution to the customer hot buttons. And Daryl talked about that. What are hot buttons? They're customer issues and motivators. That's what we mean by a theme statement. So let's just go through this together. You know, I'm just gonna kind of take a generic theme statement and let's build it. Here's the formula. In fact, one of the very questions we got, is there kind of a formula for developing a win theme statement? Yeah. If we could include all 5 of these things in a theme statement, it would be fantastic. But can we always? Probably not. We need to be careful that theme statements are concise, short, hard-hitting, straightforward. But if we could focus on the customer, quantify benefits, be specific in our solution or feature, if we could discriminate, provide a discriminator and provide proof all in a win theme, that would be the ideal. So let me paint a scenario real quick before we wind down. Let's just say, for the sake of this exercise, this webinar exercise, that we here on the webinar, we work for a company called Vibrant. And we're trying to sell a CRM, a customer relationship management solution. All right, we're trying to sell this CRM system or solution to a global sporting goods chain called Costa Bellas. Okay, they're our customer. So we're Vibrant, we're doing the selling to Costa Bellas. They're looking for a CRM solution. We've met with them a few times. We believe we have a good solution for them, something that's going to stand out. So let's try to create a theme statement. Let's assume we've done our homework on creating a win strategy, and let's try to mold that into a win theme statement. So we're Vibrant. We're selling a CRM system to Costa Bellas. Here's a theme statement. I want you to look at it, think about it, and in your mind, we're not live, so in your mind, you know, how is this? Is this an okay theme statement that you might put in your proposal to leverage your win strategy? Can you find a win strategy in there? Well, it looks like the benefit is we're going to try to prove to them that we can reduce their cost. So there's the feature, there's the benefit. All right. Best practice, we would suggest that you flip the theme statement around and that you start any win theme with the customer's name. So Costa Bellows will reduce the cost of their sales tracking system, customer benefit solution. All right, so all we did here is kind of flip this around to focus more on the customer. And we're putting that benefit right up front. So if you want to migrate win strategies into win themes and theme statements at the start of each major section of your proposal, this is one way to do it. Okay, we could even, I think this is a good theme statement. I think we could make it better by doing what? Starting with the customer, we go to the benefit, we're going to sell, there's our feature, our solution, a CRM system, but now we're quantifying the return. We're providing proof. What's our win strategy? We're going to leverage our strength. Our strength is in helping customers reduce their marketing costs by 35%. We've gone from a good theme statement to a better one. Let's see if we can even go a step further. The customer, Costa Bellows, will reduce marketing costs by 35%. There's the quantified benefit right up front. Now we also say, when is their return? Over 2 years with our feature, and there's the cost savings. Cost savings of $225,000 a year compared to their current system. Now we better be able to back that up. All right, so if we can include the value proposition as part of our win theme, stemming from the win strategy, all the better. So here's the last one. Okay, this is the customer again. We're reducing the cost by 35%, our CRM system. Here's how we discriminate. We believe on this deal, this opportunity, our discriminating characteristic is that we offer in-country technical support. And so we're going to put that, if that's our win strategy, we're going to put that right in the theme statement if we possibly can. So there was a quick and dirty run through of how you try to leverage your win strategy development and get that right in the proposal and right in your messaging. So again, thank you for your time. We want to respect your time, but we've talked about there's a lot of good things we can do when developing a win strategy. We obviously need to focus on our strengths, our features. Getting better though, we need to identify those strengths and make them important to the customer, understanding their needs. And finally, the best win strategy involves customer needs, our competitive position, our competitive advantage, and the solutions. We need to think about that P-win formula, probability of win formula that David talked about, those 4 C's. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for submitting questions beforehand and during this webinar. We hope this has been helpful. This will be posted on our website. You can replay the webinar. The slides will be available in PDF, and make sure if you haven't already, you download those tools. Those can be valuable in helping you. So thank you so much. We'll be doing our next webinar in October, and love to have you join us for that if you haven't registered already. So have a great rest of the day. Thanks again for your time and joining us. Take care.